Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we have a housekeeping motion to get out of the way. If we do not complete our business tonight, yes, I know. We've already set a meeting, we've already set a record for 3 September meetings. We could go for 4. I'm sure that would never be broken. But that we reconvene on October 7th, which will be a week from today at 7 o'clock. Do we hear a motion? All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. We'll see you next Monday. I'm always the optimist. All right, we finished with Article 12.
No, we're on Article 12.
We finished with Article 11. We're on Article 12. Article 12 is to create an ad hoc committee to recommend an electronic voting system for town meeting, and it is as presented in the warrant. General Bylaw Review Committee, please. Your vote and comments on this thing.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Scott Martin, Chair of the General Bylaw Review Committee. Our vote was 5-0-0. This article is the second time you're seeing something similar to this. Will establish a committee that will last as long as it needs to last until they make a report to us on whether or not this body and their recommendation of the committee would use an electronic voting system. A lot of your questions about why, how much is it going to cost, how are we going to do it, all that kind of stuff is not, I can't answer that because that's what this committee needs to do and would provide that information to you. So this should be a quick vote as far as we're concerned. Unless you have a specific question about why we think we need a committee. Thank you.
Rules Committee, please. There was a vote. Mr. Senesi, please.
Rules Committee voted 5 in favor, 5-2 in favor.
Thank you. Let's open it up for discussion. Comments, questions? Mr. Eiler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Eiler, Precinct 6. I'd like to propose an amendment to this, which I have sent to the clerk previously. Is that something that you can put up? No? Yes?
Go ahead. Excuse me.
Okay. Anyway, my primary concern with this, so if we go to hybrid meetings in particular, I can see where this might be particularly important. But my biggest concern with this is making a recommendation to town meeting about a town meeting specific item. I'm not understanding why the select board would be involved with appointing the members and why a member of the select board would even be on the committee on something that doesn't concern them whatsoever. Makes total sense to have the town clerk represented, have IT represented and so on, because they obviously have relevant expertise. So my proposed amendment, it would be to have the moderator appoint the members just as they would with every other ad hoc committee having to do with town meeting issues. And also, if the moderator wished to be a member, that he would be a voting member and not a non-voting member as proposed, which again didn't make any sense to me. So that is my proposed amendment.
Do we have it in writing, Mr. Eiler?
I sent an email with that to the clerk.
Okay. Discussion on the amendment. Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Let's discuss it. Any comments, thoughts, questions? Seeing none, we'll put the, yes, sir.
Jim Frazek, Precinct 6. I just had a question for Mr. Eiler through the moderator. Would the makeup, in the amendment, would the makeup of the committee members be the same? Since I think you said you wanted to cut out the select board and potentially some of the other members.
Mr. Eiler, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, in particular, it would still be 7 members. Let me see if I can get this from memory. It would be the town clerk representative, the IT representative, 4 members of town meeting, or alternatively, 3 members plus the moderator at his choice, and a representative finance committee. So essentially, the makeup would be a change from having a select board member to having an additional town meeting member, and if the moderator chooses to be one of those 4 members, he would be a voting member like everyone else.
Thank you.
Further questions on this? Comments from anyone? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of adopting the amendment? Thank you. All those opposed? The amendment passes. It brings us back to the main amended motion. Any questions, comments, discussion on it? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Was there a question in the back that I didn't see? Was there a question that I missed? Anybody? Yes, sir, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dan Hannafin, Precinct 2. Since we're on the main motion, the only issue I have with this is not that it's, electronic voting would be great, with the exception of the fact that there's a lot of questions like we talked about. And if we get to the point where sometimes motions like this mean that it's going to be a rubber stamp at the end of it, I think that this is going to take a lot of time, which is obviously an issue that we have here. We're on the 3rd night as it is, probably go beyond. And I think, Mr. Moderator, you do a pretty good job of calling the vote and yeas and nays. I think we can continue to do that without much trouble. We have some roll call votes here and there that we need to count and speak up on, and that's fine. And I think this will allow, I think this will slow the process down. We see that when we have situations like this online, where we have people voting from electronic means, and it might even speed it up from what we have currently with the electronic version of things of voting online, but I just don't see this being a necessary thing. I think it's going to be a lot of time and money that we don't need to invest.
Yes, sir, the chair of the committee.
Just to address your concern, that's what this committee will do. If you want to have that input after the committee is formed, then that would be your input. The committee is to decide whether or not this body would benefit from or not benefit from an electronic voting system. And that's would be their job. There's no harm in setting up this committee, because it's going to be people that aren't going to get paid anyway, so it's not a lot of cost to it. There's no time involved other than some people on Zoom. May cost a little bit of paper, because you all are going to want to see a copy of the thing instead of reading it on your emails. But thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Anything further from anyone? All those in favor of this article? Thank you. All those opposed? It's a clear majority in favor, and the article passes. Now, since you have just placed an additional burden on me, which I'm so happy to take, I'll be looking forward to having lots of volunteers email at moderator@burlington.org, please, volunteering to be on this committee. I expect 15 or 20 responses by the time I get home tonight. Well, all right. Moves us on to Article 13. Do I have to read this thing?
No, you don't have to read it. It's all, you just pointed out some of it.
All right.
I've got all the pages.
You're going to have to scroll through it. All right, Article 13 has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee to amend Article 5, Section 1.5.4, Committee Composition of the Information Systems Security Advisory Committee. Amy's going to scroll through so you can observe the changes. I believe this was made available to you already. Okay, General Bylaw Review Committee.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Scott Martin, Chair of the General Bylaw Review Committee. We voted 4-0-1 in favor of this article. The one abstaining vote was because one of our members is actually on the ISAC committee.
Now, is someone going to be speaking on this article somewhere? Select Board is coming to the rescue. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Priest. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I also have David Hughes with me, who is currently the chair of the ISAC committee. So just for some background or context, when this committee was originally formed, some of you may remember that the select board member was made a voting member. Most of our standing committees have a select board member as a liaison. At the time, we felt that having a select board member more involved in the process, given the severity of cyber attacks and the closeness to which it was occurring with Town Hall, that the select board member was made as a voting member. At this point in time, now that we're 4 years on, right, that we felt we could move the role back to a liaison position and let the committee stand on its own. Mr. Hughes, I know you wanted to add a couple words.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm David Hughes, Chairman of the Information Systems Security Advisory Committee, and thank you, Nick, and the Select Board overall for your support of our proposal. I'll be very brief. The substance of our proposal is in Section 1.5.4. In addition to clarifying the composition of the committee, the purpose of our proposal is to strengthen the committee's ability to advise the town on critical cybersecurity matters, specifically by adding 2 new, well-qualified resident members, thereby increasing the breadth of our technical acumen and adding new perspectives to our work. I hope that you'll all support our proposal.
Thank you. Discussion on this article. Anyone? Mr. Monaco.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Frank Monaco, Precinct 4. The way this reads, and I support this completely, it has to be Burlington residents that are on the committee, correct?
So the original bylaw called for 9 members, 5 of whom are residents and 4 of whom are town representatives appointed by their respective departments.
Okay, which wouldn't necessarily make them a resident. All right, so where I'm going with this is, you don't really have a significant piece of budget, operating budget money to go do things like hire an outside consultant if you wanted to. And I'm not being critical of the expertise that you gentlemen bring to this. We're extremely lucky that there are some very talented people in the community in this area of technology, and I'm sure you're doing a fantastic job. We'll do even better. But you may elect yourselves to solicit input from a leading industry company or a consultant in one of those companies, and you have no money to do that. So I'm assuming that what you would do is bring a warrant article to Ways and Means and the town meeting to seek funds to bring on board a consultant for 6 months or something with some specific objectives in mind. Do you have that idea in mind at all?
You are correct. We don't have a budget. We don't spend any money. Our role is strictly advisory. If we were to have a recommendation that called for spending money, we would make that recommendation to the select board, and it would probably come from them. If not, we'd be happy to submit a warrant article.
Okay, so I would encourage you to be open-minded about that. I would encourage the body to be open to that as well, because this is becoming an increasingly complex area. I don't care, you know, how renowned you are in the field. There's more going on than any one person can really run with right now. So that's a good thing, and I do support this. So thank you.
Thank you. We do recognize the importance of that. Several town meetings ago, there was a proposal to hire a consultant specifically to help with issues. I think that came from the select board or through the IT department, and that work has been very helpful. So we are open to input from anyone who has comments and suggestions.
Mrs. Beyer.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Kathy Beyer, Precinct 2. To piggyback on the question you just asked, I'm wondering, a number of our outstanding people on this committee that we're very fortunate to have, do they face any liability issues serving on this committee if there's something that happens that should have been spotted? Is that something we would need to hire a professional in order to have something like that in place? I don't understand how this works, so I'm asking. Thank you.
I'm going to recognize town council to answer that question. Ms. Lisa Mead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. They wouldn't have any more liability than any other volunteer board or committee. They're an advisory committee, and then the town would take whatever action the town would make based upon their advice. So they have no personal liability.
Mr. Collins.
Hi, Dan Collins, Precinct 6. So if I'm following along, the committee of 9 voting members would remove a voting member, but then add 2 voting members? Am I following along right there? And so it would now be a 10-person voting member committee. And so then, once you confirm that, if I'm correct, are you making this change with candidates specifically in mind already, or are you just kind of generally thinking this is a good way to do it?
So the composition would now be 11 members, the current 9 plus 2 new non-voting members, and then an additional non-voting member who would serve as the select board liaison. So that would be a dozen. So 9, the 2, and the 1. We do have, we've already added as a replacement 1 new voting member. We solicited volunteers through the town offices as well as through BCAT and received several really strong resumes. We have 1 more non-voting member in mind who also has exceptional qualifications, and if this proposal passes this evening, we'll propose him to the town administrator for membership tomorrow morning.
Is that Ms. Asher?
Hi, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Kate Asher, Precinct 4. This is a question about the additional language with a background in cybersecurity and IT. Is that strictly IT, from a very technical sense, or are you also open to folks with experience in certain application areas? So, whether it's privacy or commerce, fraud, this kind of thing. So just a clarification there.
Well, I think the principal qualification would be cybersecurity expertise of some kind. So if there were to be someone who had great, encryption skills or things of that nature, we'd be delighted to consider them for membership. Those people typically also have extensive information technology credentials, whether it's application-specific, operating system-specific, or what have you. So we're certainly open to people with those skills.
Further comments, questions? Seeing none, let's put this to a vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, that brings us to Article 14, to amend Article 3, Rules of Debate, Section 11.2. Has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee, and it is as printed in the warrant. Bylaw Review Committee, take a stand on this.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Scott Martin, Chair of the Bylaw Review Committee. When Monty came before us, he did not have the final version available to us, so we did not take a vote on it. So we have not had a vote.
Rules Committee, Mr. Sinesi.
The Rules Committee was 3 in favor, 4 against.
Mr. Pearson, let's present your article, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is a simple increase in the number of people it would take to call for a roll call vote. The number that I picked is 12, which is based roughly on 10% of the membership of the body. To be exact, would be to take the number 13, but I didn't want to go there. So I went ahead with 12. I think the right to call a roll call vote is based on the principle that a close vote need not be decided by guessing the number of hands up or counting the number of people standing. We do have some pretty close votes, especially in situations where 2/3 is needed for spending articles, and sometimes it can be pretty close. However, we experienced twice at the last town meeting in May and have experienced it at other times in the past. A small number of people calling for a roll call because they weren't happy that the issue was decided by such a large vote. There was no doubt about the voting outcome. I remember that vaguely, that one of them, that it was like 90 to 10, something like that, but they went ahead and called the roll call anyway. Now, I believe that our time as a group of citizens should not be wasted in this way. We have lots of other articles that we spend a fair amount of time talking about, and so I don't think we need to go through the whole process of a roll call for something that's been pretty decisively voted on. So I'm proposing that we make it a little harder to call a roll call, not making it impossible to call a roll call, but make it harder by asking that 10% of the membership ask for a roll call. So that's what this warrant article is. It's relatively straightforward. And I ask for questions.
Questions for Mr. Pearson? Yes, Ms. Angelo.
Can I state an opinion now rather than ask a question?
Sure.
I'm asking that you vote this article down. First of all, it takes a lot of gumption to stand up and ask for a roll call vote, because the first person that stands up, everybody hates you, because we just want to get out of here, and it's usually late at night, and when that person is strong enough to stand up for that, we get a lot of moans and groans, and it's true, everybody hates him and saying, why is he doing that? So then it's very difficult to get 5 other people to stand up. To do it 12, to request 12 people, I think I think it's just undemocratic to do this. It is making it hard, but I would request that we stick with the 6 people that we have now, because like I said, it's very difficult to get 6 people to stand up.
My only reply is I think it's actually quite undemocratic for 7 people to force the body to spend 10 to 15 minutes doing a roll call vote. So depends on your idea of democracy.
Mr. Sinesi, and then we'll get up to the back.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Adam Sinesi, Precinct 1. Similar to Ms. Angelo, I'm very much against this. I just think that, for one, it's a bad look. It's anti-transparency, and I don't. That's not what it's meant to be. But if somebody wants to make a stink about something from the floor of town meeting, and they want either transparency or they want to use that as a tool to sort of like the coach's challenge in the NFL when it's a close vote. I just think that people should be able to do that, and I think that to vote for this is actually to vote to water down your own power or what you can do as a town meeting member. If just like a very small minority, if you want to make a statement about something, I'm not going to say I necessarily support that when you do it, but I support your right to do that. And to vote for this would be a rollback of that right. I encourage my fellow town meeting members to vote this down tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sinesi. All the way up at the back, sir.
Rich DeBona, Precinct 3. I have 2 questions. One for you. When you're changing from 7 to 12, what does that mean? Does that mean 7 people here have to agree on a roll call vote?
Right at the moment, it takes, right at the moment, 7 people can call for a roll call vote, and then we all have to go through, the secretary goes through the clerk.
Okay.
Excuse me.
I remember the roll call vote we took, I think it was 2 meetings ago, on the Herb Chambers Kia vote. One person asked for a roll call, and everything came to a halt. I was in the back of the room. I counted how many hands there were, and I was a little disappointed that once the roll call vote came up, a number of people changed their mind. So I think it becomes a tactic, almost a weapon for some people. But let me ask you this. A couple of articles ago, we talked about a voting system. Wouldn't a voting system make all this moot?
Yes, it would, but right at the moment, we don't have a voting system, and it could be a year or 2 before we have a voting system.
So I think I'd like to propose we just hold this until the voting system is decided, but whatever. Thank you.
Well, there's no need for, if there's a voting system that's electronic, then there wouldn't be a need for this.
Further comments, questions? Mr. Cormier.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Cormier, Precinct 6. I'm also against this, as Mr. Sinesi and Pat. When you take the overall, when you think of the amount of meetings that we've had and the amount of warrants that we go through on a yearly basis, it's quite significant. So the amount of times that people actually do find themselves being passionate enough to want a roll call, it's actually very small. So I would hate to think that, you know, we would try to make that more difficult for this body to have that kind of authority. So I would ask that you would please vote this down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cormier. Anything else? Seeing nothing. Mr. Miller online.
Yeah, I just want to make an observation. I believe at the last town
Mr.
meeting...
Miller, please identify yourself, name and
Dave
precinct.
Miller, Precinct 4.
Thank you.
At the last town meeting, I think on 2 occasions with roll calls, there were like 3 or 4 people who had their hands up to call for a roll call. You know, they saw they didn't have 7. They kind of looked around, started employing their friends, say, oh, raise your hand up for me. And they sort of recruited the remaining to get to 7. So that's the reality of what happens. That's all I want to say.
Further questions, comments? Yes, Ms. Neufeld up back there. Just
Phyllis
wait.
Neufeld, Precinct 5. Does anyone in this room remember why the 7 was picked in the first place? Because I'd like to understand how we got to that number.
I think it predates all of us. It's been there a long, long time. The statute says 7. Okay, I see no further questions, comments. Let's put it to a vote. All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? The motion is defeated.
Can I ask for a roll call?
You're only one. Can you get 6 more?
So for Article 15?
Hold on, let me get there. It's my move.
I'm sorry, that's right.
I'm still running the meeting. I'm not giving that up yet. That moves us on to Article 15. Been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee, and it is as printed in the warrant. It's to amend Article 3, Report of Town, Section 16.0. Rules Committee has a vote on this, please. Mr. Sinesi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Rules Committee went 3 in favor, 3 against, 1 abstention.
Thank you, Mr. Sinesi. Mr. Martin, does the Bylaw Review Committee comment on this?
The Bylaw Review Committee met with Mr. Pearson, and there were a number of suggestions that we made and did not vote on it.
You did not vote on it? No, that's helpful. All right, Mr. Pearson, take it away.
Okay. Each spring, our budget document has at the back a long, detailed spreadsheet. Hopefully you recognize this. That has been placed in the back, and it outlines potential capital expenditures in the coming years. No one, to my knowledge, has ever explained to town meeting what the capital budget means, why it's set up in the way it is set up, why expenditures are placed in various times and various amounts. But then when we're discussing warrant articles, the existence of the expenditure or the non-existence of the expenditure on the capital budget has been used to justify either opposition or support for various expenditures. In addition, town meeting, which takes the ultimate vote on spending, has wrestled this year with a number of large capital requests that feel piled on top of one another. Somehow the schedule got condensed and we are taking some painful votes. I believe town meetings should be given more notice about upcoming expenses and some explanation of when large items will come before us. We deserve to have some knowledge of what is coming before us before we take votes on huge amounts of money. Let me emphasize that this amendment, which only specifies when a report should be given to town meeting, does not tell the administration or the departments or town meeting committees how to create a capital budget. It only asks that we regularly receive a report so we have knowledge of the budget issues that we will be facing in the future. Finally, my experience as a member of town meeting is that administrators, when they have to prepare a report for us, do an extra good job of making sure everything is done well and can be justified when we pepper them with occasionally goofy questions. The capital budget making process will benefit from this administration town meeting dialogue, and we will have a better chance to participate in discussions about really large items. And I'm here to answer questions.
Let's open this up for debate. Mr. Murphy, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chris Murphy, Precinct 5. I just wanted to see if Paul has any thoughts on whether he doesn't mind doing this, because it seems like a reasonable enough thing.
Mr. Sagarino, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We put a lot of work into the capital plan. There's a lot of meetings that go on with the Capital Budget Committee and the Ways and Means Committee, as well as discussions with the Select Board on this. We're more than happy to have a discussion on it, but I just think it's important to note that spending on capital is a year-to-year thing, so we can't commit to future years' expenditures. So we start off by soliciting a wish list from departments, and then every year, as the funding becomes available, we sort of whittle it down to what we think we can afford to move forward with that year. But none of us, the administration, the Select Board, Ways and Means, or even town meeting, can really commit us to what that capital plan is in the future. It'll always be decided here, but more or less on a year-to-year basis. So we're happy to have that discussion. I just think it's important to clarify that the capital plan operates on a year-to-year basis. We do put it on paper for discussion, and we're happy to do so at May town meeting. I just think it's important to understand what the expectations are. It's not going to be a, we're going to build this building in fiscal year 28 because we can't commit the town. We don't know what the resources are at that time, and we can't commit a future town meeting to voting for a project. The town meeting, who may be a bunch of different people at that time, may decide to go in a different direction. So that's all I have, Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sagarino. Further questions on this? Mr. Eiler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Eiler, Precinct 6. I think Mr. Pearson brought up a very good point at our May town meeting that having a little more transparency about the process and a little more explanation about the capital plan is a good thing. So I appreciate that. I think this is probably the wrong approach, though. I don't think we want to, I'll call it micromanage by bylaw. So I think Ways and Means certainly got the message that we want to be a little more clear about what's going on with this. But let me just point out, in the capital plan, there's 36 items that are over $1 million right now. This bylaw specifies that there has to be a report about exactly how it came to be, and a lot of details about it. This could end up being a very long report if the bylaw is specified as followed to the letter. So I don't think anyone wants to hear that. But I think this is good to get the discussion going so that we actually do come up with something that so that there is a presentation on it. It's not, the bylaw specifies that the town administrator would give this. That may or may not be the right person to do it. One could imagine that there's a capital budget committee that could give this, for instance, or Ways and Means could give this. But the point is, specifying all this in bylaw, I think, is trying to manage the process to fine a detail. I think the intent is good, but I don't recommend that we try to codify this into a bylaw.
Mrs. Beyer.
Kathy Beyer, Precinct 2, and I was already asked this evening to stop standing up and making speeches. I want to point out I'm mostly asking questions. I agree with you, Mr. Eiler, that I am concerned about micromanaging this and bringing too much information to town meeting. But I'm also hearing what Mr. Pearson is saying about concerns about the level of training for departments putting together a 10-year capital budget plan, which is what they're supposed to be providing to our capital budget committee. And I have heard from multiple people that that has been an issue in the past, being able to get that information. So in the future, I would like to request that an alternative process be brought forward to explain at least a 10-year plan. We understand that that can go awry, but we want to be looking down the road, which is what people on capital budget have been trying to do without enough information. So I'm not sure where else to go with this except to say that I agree with Mr. Eiler that there does need to be something else done with this. I'm not sure this is the way to go either. Thank you, though, Monty, for bringing it forward.
Would anyone like to respond to Mrs. Beyer? Mr. Eiler.
Just to hopefully reassure you, literally on Thursday, we're meeting about going through the process and trying to define it better. I think Dr. Conti did a very good description of how the process works currently, and I think that's worked well until now. Now that all the numbers are like triple of what they used to be, that process doesn't work so well anymore. So we're specifically Ways and Means, Capital Budget Committee administration are specifically meeting to define what is a better process for how do things get onto that chart, what the numbers are, what does it mean to even be on the chart. So I think you'll, not to speak for our chair who isn't here right now, but I think you'll see us coming forward with a proposal or with an outline of how that process will work so that it won't appear quite as mysterious as it might now.
Thank you, Mr. Eiler. Ms. Saltman. Oh, no, it's 77.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sherry Ellis, Precinct 3. Thank you, Monty, for bringing this forward. I think it's out of frustration and somewhat curiosity of how we plan a budget. Your point about the spreadsheet is valid. We get a spreadsheet and call it a plan. And I've kind of harped on the fact that we have a spreadsheet and a budget, but no plan. How does the community, all of the different departments, work towards planning for the future? We have a master plan, which is almost time to redo the master plan. How did the budget work with that master plan? How do all of the departments put in their needs? And I agree with you, Mr. Eiler. Dr. Conti did a very eye-opening explanation of how it's been done. And to me, it was very not forward-thinking, just reactive. And so I appreciate you bringing it forward, Monty. I'm not sure, again, a warrant article is the way to do this, but I encourage the Ways and Means, Capital Budget, Planning Department, Select Board, and School Department to all work together to proactively plan for our future. Thank you.
Further?
Could I say something?
Mr. Pearson, go ahead.
I just want to respond to the remarks that have been made. The reason that I came up with this as a bylaw change is that we have no guarantees that 2 or 3 years from now, the capital budget once again disappears. And I really think that it helps concentrate the process going on. We're talking about a lot of different entities working together, and by putting this in the bylaws and having town meeting, say this is what we want at the end, we ensure that all of these folks have a little push to make this happen, because people have a lot of other things to do, and sometimes things just kind of slip out of the priority box. And I think that having town meeting require this kind of report, not a requirement that they do it in any particular way, but that a report comes to us that is some kind of representation of what's been going on, is the best way to ensure that we get a good report each year and all of these committees are working together. When I put this together, I had a hard time finding out from anyone who made this capital budget. I wasn't asking the right people, but I didn't know which people to ask. So it's just been very vague, and I would hate to see it disappear again after a few years and there's been some turnover and everybody forgets about it again. That's why I think it should be in the bylaws and not just something that we all kind of shake our heads and agree today.
Ms. Asher.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Kate Asher, Precinct 4. I support this. I think it's a matter of, good enough versus perfection here. I've heard about, how do things get on this list versus what's on this list. And I like the idea of transparency rather than being completely in the dark. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I also see, transparency about what's on it. And here I see a brief description. So, it doesn't sound like it's meant to be detailed, but it would give us visibility, like you say, to what's on there. And myself, being new, I have not heard it. So it would have been very helpful for me. Thank you.
Mr. Monaco.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Frank Monaco, Precinct 4. The spirit of this I completely agree with. I want to put in place a couple of things that I've been observing, and I think I'm on Ways and Means, and the committee has been observing now for at least 5 years, and that's that the backlog of infrastructure needs has really piled up on us, and that's why you see a police station, a school, a field, a park over in Windermere. These things have really stacked up, and we know that there's more to do. The way the process works, and it needs to be enhanced a lot, which is really what you're after. I don't think it's that you want town meeting to vote about what you want to see 5 years from now. What you want is for town meeting to be informed on where are we going with the intent of infrastructure improvements and what kind of a pace it's on and sequencing. For every warrant article that comes here that involves any kind of financing for, you put a number on it of $1 million, but even smaller, those warrant articles come out of a need that came out of either a department directly, could have been a surprise, or it could have been in focus right along, not necessarily on the right date on the 10-year capital plan, but in focus. Not everything can come that way, though. For example, what happened with PFAS was I am sure it was a complete shock to DPW when they got smacked with that, and we had to go like crazy to get monies in place with MWRA to rebuild the groundwater treatment plant, and hustled up millions of dollars to get that done. You can't really plan everything to that level that perfectly, but you can do a lot. So first of all, for everything that comes before you in the short term, it's on an annual, it's as Paul said, on a year-by-year basis, they kind of re-up how much money have we got to throw at this out of free cash. And by the way, this sort of targeted free cash, there's a lot more involved. I mean, debt is debt. And we budget out what we've got and what the priorities look like now and maybe a year out, and we bring them forward with a vote of Ways and Means, with the recommendation of the department, with the recommendation of the administration, be it schools or be it municipal. So that's how it works today, but it's a little bit short-sighted. It has been, and we know that. In fact, we know it to the point where we got almost panicked about whether we would, in fact, start encumbering so much debt that we would ram into the debt exclusion and not even be prepared for that, or ram into 2.5. So a lot more work is being done. The Capital Budget Committee really needs a chance to put together what I would say is more backup or input in the way of cover sheets and narratives for everything that's at least in the 5-year window, and that's what we're trying to start to work together with them on. Ways and Means has always used cover sheets for every warrant article. The department must submit need, estimated costs, a whole bunch of information, everything from a fire truck to a, the groundwater treatment plant. We need to do that in a more intense way further out, because infrastructure costs are A, astronomical, and B, we've gotten a little bit behind from where we'd like to be. We are beginning to catch up. There's more to go. We know about school stuff. We know about other buildings that have some needs. And so I think that that'll get detailed out. Capital budget could give a summary report of the backup that they have, and even make some of it available for the 5-year window, which would be sufficient to get to get town meeting a lot more visibility. Beyond that, it really is a guess. It definitely is a guess with anything that's out more than 5 years. You have no idea what the real timing will be. You have no idea whether other priorities will get in the way. You have no idea what the cost will be, other than just a good guess. And that's all that is when you get into the, people call for 20-year plans. You just can't do that. You can guess, but it's a guess. So I would recommend that we take the spirit of this, see what capital budget, Ways and Means, and the administration can do to put together more information for the 5-year window and get us a better idea of what I like to call spacing and pacing of all infrastructure needs. And we don't want them on top of each other. It was awful that the police station in Fox Hill ended up right on top of each other, but we really had no choice. Why? The police station had a great need, and a ton of money came along for Fox Hill. That's just where they ended up. It wasn't unplanned, but you couldn't really forecast that. So I would recommend that we don't do this right now. I would give the system a chance to improve the processes a whole bunch and see what we can bring in May to town meeting. You get a capital budget report, but I agree, some of it's just dots on a board, especially things that are out more than 3 years. We got to do better than that. We need better backup for it, and that will help us all at least plan it more. But make no mistake about it, it's a tall order to catch up on all this infrastructure fast. You have to pace it out, or you're not going to be able to afford it, and that's what we're working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monahan. Further comments? Is that Ms. Bix Highland in the back there?
Mimi Bix Highland, Precinct 1. Thank you, Mr. Monaco, for what you just contributed, and thank you, Ms. Asher and Ms. Ellis. Everybody is making good points. However, I want to say that I don't necessarily agree with all the points. When a building is built, like a school building, it has an expiration date. We know that within 60 or so years, it's going to start, it's getting close to its expiration date. So for all of us who have, we all just participated in a school vote last Monday. I think the fact that 3 major capital projects piled up on each other is an impetus to do something like what Monty is suggesting. I'm grateful that you have put this forward. I support this article because I think it incentivizes us, no matter where we are in the calendar, to keep a 10-year capital plan in mind. And even if that capital plan has to be updated, which, as Ms. Ellis said, it does need to be, it compels a structure of accountability that I appreciate. So I support this very much. Thank you.
Ms. Laurie.
Karen Laurie, Precinct 3. I also agree with Monty. I think a one-year plan that's focused and you stick with is important. Obviously, you're going to have critical issues, but sometimes if you don't know what's coming up and things that are up for votes, if you knew there's another capital expenditure coming up within a year or two, you may not have made the vote that you made, especially with the schools, but all different scenarios could take place. So I think everyone needs to be accountable and having a document in front of all the town meeting members so we can actually see, okay, so in 2024 to 2026 or 25, these are the capital expenditures that are coming up. And when I make my vote, I need to have these other 2 or 3 situations in the forefront, not in the back. And I think that's a fairer way, because once you spend a couple of $100 million, you think about the taxpayers, then what do? So the third item, it may not get the vote because you've already spent a couple of $100 million, and the third item could have been the more critical item. So I agree with Monty. I think you should have a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, and a 5-year plan. And I think that gives you clearer visibility of where you are. And there's always room for movement. I think all of us know that. So thank you.
Is that Ms. Norm up at the back corner?
Becky Norum, Precinct 4. Mr. Monaco, I will vote against this and give you folks time to get this together, something to show us and react to. Although I support the spirit of what Monty is doing, it's been very disconcerting as a new town meeting member for the last few years not to understand the landscape of expenses that are coming up and be able to explain that to my constituents. I've been in software companies for 25 years, and we always had a roadmap, even if we knew only the first year or 2 of the roadmap was really solid. We understood that the rest was directional, and we could deal with that ambiguity. And I believe town meeting members can learn to deal with ambiguity if they understand the big picture. And that's what I'd like to see as a long-term roadmap beyond 10 years. And clear understanding of what level of ambiguity we're talking about. Thank you.
Anything else from anyone?
Mr. Moderator?
There hasn't been a question posed to you, Monty.
No.
That's how it works, sorry. Mr. Sinesi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Adam Sinesi, Precinct 1. I like the spirit of this. Having served on capital budget previously, I think once a year it would be great to see something that the town side, the school side, capital budget and Ways and Means present to town meeting. Whether it needs to be presented in the town meeting format or in, maybe one of those informational sessions prior to town meeting. I just think a long-term vision with only big-ticket items. Nobody cares about the lawnmower for $15,000. We're talking about stuff in the tens of millions that we can see coming through the pipeline of long-term spending over the course of 10 and 15 years. No, I understand it's here, but what's next and what's coming down the pipeline? I just think a high-level overview for your average town meeting member is extremely helpful. On the other side of that, I don't know if that's something that we need to legislate. I'm going to support this tonight, but I just don't think that it's something that needs to be legislated. I think just common sense and people talking to each other could just arrive at this without having to codify it.
Mr. Parsons.
Thank you. Moderator Ed Parsons, Precinct 6. I have long observed and participated in complaining about the lack of specificity in some of our capital plans. So I very much agree with the spirit here, and I agree with everything that's been said here. So I'll be very, very pragmatic. If you look at Article 3, Section 16, it specifies that reports be delivered to town meeting 2 weeks ahead of time on open warrant articles. So if you tag this language onto the end, then you're restricting the 10-year capital plan explanation to those open warrant articles. So you've actually got a fairly narrow scope of report, and open warrant items are naturally part of the one-year operating budget. And so I think you can satisfy this with what's already done. So I'm not sure that the language here is actually going to affect what we want. And then at the same time, Article 3, Section 16 asks for all supervising authorities to present on open warrant items, and that brings in everybody who contributed something to line up, I suppose, and report on their open warrant items, which should be done, but I think it is done. I think what we're asking for is this big picture, and that is something that we now have a concerted effort from many committees and executive authorities to do. I think the message here has been well delivered and well received, and a lot of people are working on trying to construct with more specificity this long-range plan. I'm participating in that, and I will say I'm very much in favor of taking the best guess you can for 20 years out, 10 years out, 5 and 3. And that's something we're going to be working on, and hold us to it. I think doing that, holding us to it, is going to be a lot more effective than trying to legislate it here.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. Anything additional? Seeing none, we'll put this to a vote. All those in favor of this article? Thank you. All those opposed? The article is defeated. It brings us up to, well, Articles 16 and 17 have been withdrawn. Ms. Bonaventure is the gentleman for this article here, so would you like to hold, and is he still coming? Okay. The owners, the representative of the owner of the land for this article is on his way. You know, the gentleman had the distinct pleasure of being here last Monday and Wednesday, but he was not able to continue to clear his schedule for today. So he is on his way. I would like, with your permission, to hold this article until this gentleman arrives, just so you'll be able to ask questions of him. It's the next article.
18.
Number Article 18. I guess you didn't listen. 16 and 17 are withdrawn. Is there a second? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Liz, if you could let me know when he is here, then we will pick it up. Which brings us to Article 19. Which is not as written in the warrant. Article 19 has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee. It is a zoning article on the town common signage amendment. Have people had the pleasure of getting this? Yeah. Okay. I believe you all should have gotten the amended article, which is what we will be voting on.
I didn't know it was changed.
Well, this. It doesn't say it's, no. Town common signage. Is it as printed in the one?
So all it does is take freestanding. All it does is take freestanding and make it 2 words, right? So everywhere freestanding appears, it's 2 words. And then the very end, they omit or video.
Well, I mean,
I'll let you have this. And here, after video boards, they omit and holographic displays.
okay,
You want this?
please. Okay, it is not as written in the warrant, but in 1, 2, 3, 4 places, freestanding is made into 2 words instead of 1. Or is it the other way around?
No, 2 words.
2 words instead of 1. Can you handle that one? And the next to last paragraph? Where it says, the end of the first line of the next to last paragraph, that displays an electronic image or video is cross out, please. And at the end of that paragraph, cross out holographic displays. Okay? All right, this is a zoning issue.
Just 2 words.
It's 2 words. You've all had your English lesson for today. Ms. Ellis, question on the language of the, all right, oh, all right. Zoning, does the planning board have a comment on this? Well, please come up and give it.
Thank you. Bill Gaffney here, Planning Board. The Planning Board voted 4-0 in favor of this. The members that voted against it, including myself, do not feel that electronic sign is appropriate in the town center. And what we voted on was exactly what you had last year and what we received this year. And I think the term wasn't ready for prime time. It wasn't edited, and I know there's slight edits tonight. But things like you're actually approving 2 electronic signs the way it's written. There was inconsistencies on the sign size, setback restrictions, and things like that. So thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Gaffney, that seems to be your comment on the article. What is the overall comment of your board that was 4 in favor, please?
4-2-0.
Yeah, what did the board have to say in favor of it? You've told us why you didn't like it. What did the board have to say in favor of it?
One member indicated that this would allow the town to better improve the ability to communicate, as this is a busy location for people driving through the town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Land Use Committee. Mr. Wadilla. Come on, let's go, folks.
Thank you. Dave Wadilla, Land Use Committee. We voted 1 in favor, 2 unfavorably, 2 abstained. Nobody from the proponent came to discuss this with us. Our concerns were there were not enough details in the policy or plans. We were concerned about the aesthetics of a lighted sign in the center of town. We were in favor of the enhanced ability to communicate that this sign would give us. Thank you.
ZBRC, Ms. Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Shari Ellis, Chair of the Zoning Bylaw Review Committee. The vote was 6-1-0. May I make comments with regard to the amendments?
Go ahead.
We sent what we suggested for corrections. I think you mentioned some of them, and I just want to make sure, because there's nothing written on the screen, what actually is being voted on. You mentioned that all the terms freestanding should be 2 words and capitalized, correct? That was
Correct.
one. The second one was that the sign face size was going to be changed to 5 feet by 9 feet.
I did not mention that.
So it stands as written then?
It stands as written.
Okay, we did not vote on that. The words video and holographic were deleted. I believe you said that. And then the last was in section 13.1.5.3.5, the inclusion of only 1 should have been included. Those are the things we voted on as a committee. If those were not all included, then our vote really isn't on what's being asked.
Yeah, the 5 feet 9 is in there.
All right, we missed one of them. Section B, 13.1.5.3.3, freestanding sign shall be 5 feet in height and 9 feet in length.
Right here.
And only 1 electronic sign in the area of the sign that is available was also changed. Okay? All right. Now we have all the edits in there. And ZBRC voted 6 in favor, 1 opposed, 0 abstentions. Do we have someone speaking on this? Oh, Mr. Priest.
Mr. Moderator. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Apologies for the amendment kerfuffle. If anyone has any questions as I go through this, hopefully I can clarify things or we can make sure that we're all on the same page. But we'll start with the presentation and then take it from there. So tonight I am before you speaking about the Town Common Electronic Message Board, Article 19. The Select Board did vote in favor of this 5-0-0, but it warrants stating that. So let's kick it off. Why are we requesting this sign? As it was stated by the Planning Board, members had spoken to the notion of increased awareness and improved communications. We want to make sure that we can, provide multiple messages in a given day. As it stands right now, 1 banner goes up. It's up for a set amount of time. That's the only thing that we can talk about in that particular area. In general, and you'll see the picture, not that you all haven't seen the corner as it stands now, this would give us the opportunity to improve the overall aesthetic of this particular corner of the town common. And in general, we're talking about a streamlining of the existing process, reducing staff time, reducing printing costs, which currently fall to the people who are making the banners. And so I had taken the time to call out all of the changes, the amended changes on a slide to help avoid some confusion. So what we're asking for here is to include a second freestanding sign on Town Common. Right now, it's only the one, which is the Town of Burlington sign that faces Cambridge Street as you drive past the Common. This would include a second sign. Did my microphone just go dead? No, there we go. This would include a second sign, and we've clearly defined that only one of them can be electronic. The sign face would not exceed 5 by 9. That's just the face of the actual electronic device itself, not the overall enclosure of the sign. The entire sign would not exceed the dimensions of roughly 12 high by 16 wide, and that does include the enclosure. And there will not be any videos or quote-unquote motion graphics. These will all be static, still things to reduce distractibility. A gentle reminder of what we all look at when we drive through the Town Common now. And so this is our current proposal, and I'll get to all the pretty pictures in a second. But the goal here is to install one 4x8 electronic single-sided sign facing into the intersection, similarly placed to how we have the banner facing today. We would echo the architectural style of the municipal campus to ensure that there's a general aesthetic that we can maintain. We would landscape the area, and the sign would have a 6-foot setback. So we would ensure that that corner is nice and open, and that there's no blocking of either vehicular or pedestrian traffic. We would go ahead and landscape the area. We're speaking with maintenance now to talk about the maintenance of that as well as garden club, but I'll get to landscaping in a moment. The goal overall would be, though, to include evergreens as well as seasonal deciduous plants to ensure that something is there always, and it's not just a big dead mulch patch with an electronic sign stuck in the middle of it. One of the electrical boxes that are currently there are 2, would be removed. Obviously, the signal post and the other electrical box would have to remain. The final completed height would include the seat wall that we're looking to raise everything up by. And again, this is meant to keep a narrow profile to help with any site blockages. So taking us into an aerial view of what you'd be looking at, this is the corner with Cambridge Street running north to south, and then Bedford Street, curving away under us. You can see the existing sign. If I don't blind anyone, I can use so this is where the existing posts are today, and this is where the new sign would reside, with 6 feet from the sidewalk itself. You can see the seat wall as well would wrap the corner, wrap it around here, and we would landscape this entire area out, to really give it a nice look and feel. The goal is not to have just an electronic sign stuck on the corner, but to make this feel as a part of the common. This is it in color, a little more pizzazz to it, if you will. And you can see where the existing utility box will have to remain, where the signal post is, as well as the overall placement of the sign against the area. Taking us to front and profile views, you can see the overall height will not exceed 12 feet, including the seat wall. The seat wall roughly takes you about 1 foot and I think it was 5 inches up, and then the overall from the base of the columns to the tip of the roof line of the structure is another 10 feet, I think 2 inches. I'm rounding one way or the other. To get us to about the 12-foot mark. And again, you can see the side profile is intentionally kept narrow, with only the top roof line area being just over 2 feet wide. And again, this is all done intentionally to make sure that sight lines are not being obstructed. Taking us to a quick location render, which you all saw at the beginning. So I won't linger here, but if anyone wants me to go back, we can. And then Weston and Sampson also took the opportunity to draw out, the plans for the footings and how the seat walls may be addressed depending on material use, the mounting of the sign itself, and the mounting of the columns. So now, last time we were here, several concerns were raised around both safety and our policy. So I want to take an opportunity to cover off on those things as well. So we asked the BPD to take a look into this and make a recommendation, and Sergeant Bascaroon was kind enough to take the time to pull together a memo for us. And that memo was included in the backup and covers off on 5 top-line principles, which I hope everyone had the opportunity to read. But, you know, make it quickly readable, avoid a busy-looking display, clear and concise messaging, display change, and that line was basically, you know, to keep the display changing to a minimum, and then emergency considerations. All these things were included into the draft policy, which was up at the back of the room. So I hope everyone had an opportunity to take a look at that. But overall, Sergeant Bascaroon's, you know, memo basically stated that, you know, the goal is to reduce driver distractibility, right? That, you know, there are a lot of benefits to, you know, having communication in this area, but that we want to make sure that we are keeping, you know, driver distraction to an absolute minimum. Our draft policy, like I said, concludes all of the recommendations provided to us by Sergeant Bascaroon. There were a couple of things that we left as placeholders until we can actually talk to the vendor and see what, like, say, font size looks like on the actual screen. We didn't want to set a specific number or numbers to then have to go and amend it near immediately. So those things are currently still drafted in brackets with X's, if you saw in the draft policy. Right now, we're going to lead off with a list of grandfathered folks, town uses, and nonprofits who currently use the banner as folks who can use it, but in the policy we do call out what an application process would look like. And then anything that we wanted to make sure was called out in clarity, i.e. having no commercial or political usage, is also included in the draft policy. So how are we paying for this? So right now we're still targeting ARPA funds. The sign installation is roughly coming in between $15,000 and $20,000. And then overall cost for structure, mason work, landscaping, shrubbery, et cetera, was around $30,000. That's as much as I will go through this presentation. Happy to answer any and all questions.
Thank you, Mr. Priest. I guess now we will open it up for discussions. Ms. Bix-Hyland.
Mimi Bix-Hyland, Precinct 1. When land use discussed this at that time, I don't recall seeing anything that said commercial and political use would be precluded, but I just heard you say that now. So that's written into, well, what is it written into, so we can be assured that that will not change down the road?
Absolutely. That's written into our draft policy.
Okay. And is a draft policy, does that have as much clout as a bylaw?
I would say no. Select board can vote to change that at any time. So it's not under the same structure as, it wouldn't have to come to town meeting, if that's your question.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Leone.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Florence Leone, Precinct 1. I like this design. I like the fact that there's a brick wall in front of it. But my question is, right now, there's an electronic sign in front of Simons Park. Will that go away, or will we keep that there?
If you're referring to the DPW highway sign?
Yes.
Yes, that would go away.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Ms. Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Z1 Person 5. I'm fully support this article. I think it'll make our town look much pretty in that area. Because right now, I think the current banner just outdated and ugly and has limitation. And then I originally had 4 or 5 questions. I think Nick answered most of that. I only have one concern now, that does it have like a dimmable light? So according to like a rain, like say on a raining day, dark at nighttime in that busy corner, I think if it's like a reflect too much light, it might not be too great. And when I drive through, I think it's a Tewksbury, they do have electronic sign. At nighttime, I think it's a dimmable, it's pretty good. So I'm just wondering whether we have that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I, in the process of doing this, did more homework than I care to admit. And I learned the difference between what are called nits and lumens. And so the bottom line is that most all technology now is automatically dimmable based on sensors. So depending on how bright it is, it will dim down to an appropriate brightness to avoid, again, being too bright at night or in poor weather conditions. And then, brighten up depending on how sunny it may be. But, to clarify, when we're talking about it, we are talking about nits, which are the measure of brightness of the screen versus how much light is being projected off of it. So that's just my dork moment of the evening.
Ms. Asher.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Kate Asher, Precinct 4. I know there are some signs in town that there's something about driver psychology. It says, do not enter, and you think, oh, the other side sees the same thing, and no, they don't, And it occurred to me, our town colors are red. Is there any issue around that being so close to the lights? Have you discussed that?
So that's a great question. So that image is just a placeholder. Odds are is we could say, let's avoid the color of red in the intersection, right, to reduce driver distractibility. I think it's a great call out, because again, we want to make sure that folks aren't thinking it's red when it's green, or, being confused by the sign anyway.
Ms. Saltman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Myrna Saltman, Precinct 2. So I think the sign would be more visible if maybe it were rotating, because if it's just aimed at one direction, cars stopped at the traffic sign there, traffic light, all will not see it, and of course as they go speeding by, depending what direction they're going, they'll never see it. But my other question is, if this is approved, we have other entrances to Burlington that have no signage to know all the wonderful events being advertised on this electronic display. And so has the select board or the committees governing this ever considered the other entrances to Burlington, be it you go all the way down Wynn Street, you don't come up to the center of town, you come in from 62 off 93, all the homes along that road, you don't go into the center of town. There are many directions to enter and exit Burlington that would never see the sign. So I just wonder if someone can answer whether there's any more sign building in the future consideration for that.
Mr. Priest.
Thank you. So to your first statement, Myrna, I think we definitely discussed those wacky waving inflatable arm filling guys. I'm kidding. No, we wouldn't do anything that distractible, right? We want to keep this, as simple and clean as possible. To that end, there was discussion about the quote-unquote entrances to Burlington, right? This sign is not at an entrance at all. This sign is in the center of our town. And, once we start opening the door to signs coming into the town, I think it opens a whole slew of problems, to be quite frank. So no, we kiboshed that conversation and said we would rather focus on replacing what exists, knowing that the town center focuses as a hub for residents, and a lot of traffic still comes to that intersection, whether it be pedestrian or vehicular, allowing folks to still see the message. And now we'll be able to take it from the one sign that you see over the course of a week to the recommendation was no more than 3 a day, and that's what is written into the draft policy as it stands. And so as it rotates throughout the day, people will get more information.
Ms. Hughes, and then I'll get to Ms. Angelo.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Betsy Hughes, Precinct 7. I just have a couple of questions, one on the policy and one on the cost. The policy question is the sign going to be on 24/7? Is that the plan?
Currently, yes.
Okay. And in terms of the cost, you talked about the sign and landscaping. I don't know if you include the removal of the box or not, and I thought you indicated it's going to be a total of $50,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that, it may not have been called up in the presentation, but that second cost is for basically all of the construction and landscaping. So I believe we rounded up and we said 15 to 20, 20 and the 30, and that's our 50.
So, and that includes the removal of the power box that's there as well?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And you mentioned it's going to be paid for by ARPA funds?
Yes.
What are the requirements for how a town uses those funds?
I can throw this to Mr. Sagarino. He has a much better understanding of that. I know that this does fit into it, but Paul, I'll throw it to you.
Mr. Sagarino, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ms. Hughes, there's a wide range of ability to use ARPA funds. As the town may recall, we devoted almost the entirety of our ARPA funds to address the PFAS situation. So we weren't able to sort of do a lot of the sort of enjoyable fun things that other towns were able to use theirs for. But early on in this discussion, the select board, it was pandemic related, and communication was a big part about doing the sign, so that they felt that the ARPA funding was appropriate as it was directly related to communication and with the public.
Thank you.
Ms. Angelo.
Pat Angelo, Precinct 5. On one of the earlier pages, did I see 2 signs? So are we voting on 1 sign or 2 signs? And if there's 2, where is the other one going?
So the adjusted language accounts for the existing sign, which is Town of Burlington, along the Cambridge Street side of the common that exists currently, and then adds this sign as the single electronic sign. So there would be 2 signs in total, one of which that would be electronic, but you're voting to add this sign to the common.
So it'll just be a Town of Burlington sign? That's what the second one will be?
The one that's currently there, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cormier.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Cormier, Precinct 6. Question, if I may, the issue that I've always had with some of the signage, regardless of this or others, is just the distraction issues, you know, when you're driving by. I know on everyone, when they're driving down the highway, you see the nice big signs, and you see them in the distance coming in, and they're very visible, and you're basically seeing them as a straight-on, you know, type of a shot. And they're fairly simple to read, you know, by the time you get up to them. My concern has always been when you're driving up, especially into an intersection like that, as far as people slowing down to try and read what's on there. Have we spoken to public safety departments as far as what their take is? I know that there are some issues, you know, with those overhead highway signs. They're very simple. They're very short. There's no, you know, elaborate verbiage on it. It's very concise. I'd be concerned with anything, you know, that we would have some sort of designation that, you know, the verbiage can only be so long, so many words, you know, to shorten that ability when someone drives by, because you lengthen that and someone's going to want to try and read, and by the second line, they're not watching the traffic, they're trying to read the damn sign that has too much words on them. Have we spoken to public safety in regards to this and what their recommendations might be?
Yes, Mr. Cormier, we had a whole memo done by the Burlington Police Department regarding all of the concerns around distractibility and guidelines proposed, which do address the concerns that you're raising, right? So not using a serif-based font, right? Only sans serif. Picking large font sizes, no more than 2 types of font, character limits. All those things are going to be included into the policy that we have drafted and is up in the back of the room. And all of those things are meant to make this as little distractible as possible. That's not proper English at all. But again, the goal is to make it better than a banner flapping in the breeze, which I think absolutely is the same concern, right? Is that someone's going to try to wait until the wind catches it just right to see what those hours are for whatever's posted, and that's just as dangerous.
Mr. Collins, we haven't heard from you tonight, I don't believe.
Hi, thank you. Dan Collins, Precinct 6. On this Burlington Police Department report and recommendations, they don't, unless I missed it, I'm sorry, they didn't really mention anything about what the current safety factor is, how many accidents happen actually at that intersection already. I think a sign like this, we're kind of accepting that distraction will go up no matter what we choose here. So I'd be curious to know what the baseline is for distracted driving type accidents, rear endings and things like that. Do you know those numbers, statistics? And second question, also to do with safety, had you considered a further setback other than where you currently are?
So I'll answer those in reverse. Yes, we talked about a variety of placements. 6 feet was the recommendation based on sightline, the overall height, and the readability of the sign. In terms of numbers regarding safety, I'm not going to put anybody in the BPD on the spot at this moment. I don't have those numbers, but if anyone in the room does, please feel free. But otherwise, we can definitely look into it.
Yes, the gentleman here. Is that Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Bascarone, Precinct 1. So I'm the one that wrote the memo. I did a lot of research on it. Basically, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. That is a higher crash location just by virtue of the amount of cars passing through that intersection. Adding a digital sign, I don't think is going to increase that to a point where it'll be measurable as long as we stick by what the memo shows. So the Commonwealth of Massachusetts already uses some of the points on this memo. I know Mr. Cormier mentioned that there's already signs on the highway that you see. As long as it stays simple, easy to read, large font, you're not trying to squint to get the meaning of it, and there's no witticisms that get you to kind of overthink what the sign's trying to tell you. I don't believe that this sign is going to do anything like drastically increase the amount of crashes in that area. But that is already a high crash location. I don't have the exact numbers on me, but that's something that we're aware of. We try to address that in other ways, but it's in no part due to any type of signage down there.
Mr. Everett, we haven't heard from you either tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Corey Everett, Precinct 6. Firstly, I'm in favor of this sign. I like technology, I like shrubberies, I like trees. But I am curious if there are plans for potentially a solar panel on top of the sign to potentially lower the ongoing electrical cost, and then just in general, I'm curious about the ongoing maintenance costs, the electrical costs, and stuff like that.
I don't really have those numbers, Mr. Everett, and I do apologize. We did not discuss a solar panel in that area, and I believe that the electrical was fairly nominal, all things considered. But we can definitely look more into it as we dive in, should this be approved.
Ms. Asher, have you spoken on this already? Actually, there's nobody else has a hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Kate Asher, Precinct 4. I used to live on that corner at 141 Cambridge Street, and I've witnessed a cycle accident, motorcycle accident, and an automobile accident in 5 years. So that concerns me. But I think what I've learned is sometimes it's just when something's different, right? And I'm just wondering, I don't know of any prominent signs that are kind of catty corner like that versus, like going parallel to one direction or another at a main intersection. Did you look at that at all? That's, I think, what concerns me is like the difference of it that might, versus, let's say, taking the sign further down Cambridge Street and facing, driver directionality, right? So if it's just facing there, you're not being asked to like turn your head. I know it seems like, minor details, but I think when drivers aren't accustomed to it, that's dangerous. So I just would invite looking into the angle of it.
Yeah, we definitely looked into other placement opportunities. We were really trying to keep it at that intersection, again, given all the reasons around community and it being a hub for residents. It's kind of hard to place it somewhere else on 3A that would make it a viable, thing that wouldn't be harder for folks to read. And so we ultimately kept it at the same corner, thinking that the consistency of the sign, even though it would be something new, would hopefully take less time for folks to adapt to.
Mr. DeBona.
Rich DeBona, Precinct 3. I'd like to just speak about the sign. One thing I haven't heard is, I think it makes a statement about the town. When I drive through a town and see 2 4x4s with a piece of canvas between them, doesn't impress me. I think this is a better way to communicate. I think you've done a nice job with it. The concerns about safety and traffic accidents, I got to be honest with you. I'm at that intersection. You look to your left or your right, and there's always someone on their phone. They're texting, they're doing whatever. I don't think a sign is going to make much of a difference. The distractions are the drivers themselves. No, just an opinion.
Ms. Bix Highland.
Mimi Bix Highland, Precinct 1. I'm going to raise an issue that some in this body may think is trivial, but as a bird lover and an animal lover, I'm going to ask that the select board, who has, if this were to pass, who has total control over the content of this sign and the maintenance of it, all of that, and changing the text, to consider bird migration. 2/3 of all songbirds migrate in the fall. On a given night, we can have anywhere from 350 to 400 million songbirds traveling over our skies as we sleep. And I, for one, would like to live in a town that cared about that and would do its part to dim its signage, to minimally use the kind of lighting, soft lighting, colored lighting, to minimize the confusion, because those small little creatures hurtling through the night as we sleep depend on the stars and the Earth's magnetic field to guide themselves. And so many of them, millions, collide with signs, get confused. So in addition to that, I would also like you to consider for the greenage that you want to develop around there, for it to be native greenage, native perennials that sustain our local wildlife. Thank you.
Mr. Sinesi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Adam Sinesi, Precinct 1. Move the question.
The question has been moved and seconded. It's not debatable. All those in favor of moving the question and moving on to vote? Thank you. All those opposed? It's a clear 2/3. The article, the motion passes. That brings us to voting on the main article. All those in favor? It's a 2/3, so, all right. Thank you. All those opposed? 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Looks like a dozen. 14 out of. So there's approximately 14 opposed out of 77 people here. It's a clear 2/3 majority. And the motion passes. Thank you. Now we'll backtrack to, where'd Liz go? Here you are, Article 18. It has been moved and seconded by the Ways and Means Committee. Myrna. 1 minute. 1 minute, Mona. Whatever. 1 minute for Myrna. Not 3 or 5.